Metallica versus Megadeth. The age-old question. The world could be burning and metalheads would still be having this conversation. So I thought I would have the conversation here today, and of course these bands are always pinned up against each other. The fan bases are always going at it. Maybe even sometimes the fan bases are intertwined with each other. A lot of people are fans of both bands, and that's all for obvious reasons. I'm sure everyone that clicked on this video knows the Megadeth versus Metallica backstory, so we don't have to get into that. But I decided that today, once and for all, I'm going to take every single quality from each band and determine who's better at what. We're going to break it down into a bunch of categories, and by the end of it we're going to tally it up and see who has a higher score, and we can say once and for all who actually is a better band out of the two. Okay, so these are the categories that we're going to be sorting through today. Overall we have 14 separate categories, and like I said, whoever has the higher score is going to be the winner. And this is going to be really weird because these are two of my favorite bands of all time, and I feel like I might have some personal biases here and there. And of course, at the end of the day, most of this is going to come down to my personal opinions, but I'm going to try my best to keep an objective mind about some of these topics and really think clearly, not just pick like who's my personal favorite in each category, but who I objectively think is just technically better in that aspect. So let's get started. So the first category that we're going to talk about is live shows. Now, for me, I feel like Megadeth has a really good live show when it comes to the sound. They sound a lot like their albums live. It's very technical. There's not as much of the flashiness. You know, Metallica has a little bit more of like a production on stage, when Megadeth is just guys on a stage playing the music, which some people prefer that. I feel like Metallica is a lot more interactive with the audience, and it's more about like the Metallica family. You know, it's like a really hype sort of thing. Like maybe live they don't sound the best. We're going to talk about Lars a lot today, but in general, I feel like Metallica is always so much better of a time live. Like, to me, it's just more about the atmosphere and the feeling that you get, and like Lars and James specifically are so good at just getting the hype going, interacting with the crowd. Like Kirk and Rob don't necessarily do it as much, but overall I just think Metallica is much better at their stage presence. Like Dave, when he's playing and singing, like it's like he's so focused on playing and getting everything right that he doesn't really ever interact with the audience. I mean, sometimes he argues with the audience, but Megadeth sounds really good live. I would say arguably better than Metallica, but overall I think Metallica puts on the better live show as a whole, so I'm gonna have to give that one to Metallica. My tier list is so massive that I have to like drag things, but there we go. Metallica live shows. The next category is album art. Now this one, I don't even really feel like I have to talk about this one. I think Megadeth has always had the best album art. It's so memorable. They have a mascot, Vic Rattlehead. It's a lot like the Iron Maiden thing. Like it's really cool to have a mascot that everyone sees it. They know that's a Megadeth album. It doesn't even have to have the Megadeth logo on it, and you know who it is. I've always thought their album art was so intriguing. Like back in the day when I first saw the Rust in Peace album cover, oh my gosh, like the Hangar 18 story with the alien and the crystal, and oh my gosh, like, what's the one? The System Has Failed. The System Has Failed has always been like an underrated album cover by them. Peace Sells is a banger. Countdown to Extinction is kind of creepy. I remember having it on my like iPod as a kid, and I thought that it was so like bizarre. When I think about Metallica album covers, they definitely have some good ones. Like Ride the Lightning comes to mind. Master of Puppets is really cool. I don't really like the Black Album all that much. Like, it's kind of a cool concept that it's almost entirely black and you can't really see the words or like the snake on the original print of it. It's kind of cool, but I just feel like Load and Reload are just... Do we have to talk about what is actually on the cover of Load and Reload? Like, I probably shouldn't say it in this video, but if you know, you know. Saint Anger doesn't really do much for me. Death Magnetic is like kind of cool, actually. I remember when that album was coming out and it was like a lot of people were wearing the shirts, and that was kind of cool how it has like the grave dirt and like the magnetic stuff. That's pretty sick. Hardwired to Self-Destruct is kind of weird. I liked the behind the scenes of when they made it. It was cool to see how they made that with all the faces. 72 Seasons was just kind of weird. I liked the yellow and black. It was a cool concept, but like something about it isn't as memorable as the classic Megadeth covers. So for that one, we're gonna give it to Megadeth, and we're gonna use the Rust in Peace picture because that will always be my favorite Megadeth art ever. So the next category is melody, and I don't know, this one is gonna be really hard for me. I feel like both bands have such good qualities when it comes to how melodic they are. Dave Mustaine is like a melody machine. Like when I started learning Megadeth songs on guitar, I started realizing how like kind of intricate the melodies are in some of the songs, especially on albums like Countdown. Like, it's really great stuff, But at the end of the day, I do think Metallica has better melodies. I feel like they did a great job of making thrash metal melodic. Like, think about albums like Injustice for All or Ride the Lightning. There's so many memorable melodies, and like Master of Puppets, of course, too. Like, they made it where it's thrashy and heavy, but it actually has a little bit of like a beautiful sound to it almost. And I think Metallica is really good at making songs that you can remember, you can sing along to. And that's like a big thing for me with music. I've always been drawn to the more melodic stuff. And I feel like throughout Megadeth's discography, they have a lot of melody, and a lot when they do, it's really great, but I feel like Metallica just focuses on it a little bit more. So the winner for that category is gonna be Metallica, and I'm gonna use the Ride the Lightning cover because, oh my gosh, that album is just like so melodic. It's like radio friendly thrash metal. That's the best way I could explain that album. Next up is consistency. So I feel like it's definitely not a secret that Metallica is not very consistent throughout their discography. Like, they've tried a lot of different things. Some people love that, some people hate that. At the end of the day, when it comes to like thrash metal and what they've put out, they haven't really been so consistent compared to Megadeth. It is a weird misconception that Megadeth never trailed off and tried other things. They definitely did. They made albums like Risk and Super Collider and did different things, Cryptic Writings. They definitely stepped out too, but I do think if you're comparing both bands and their full catalogs, Megadeth has always stayed a little bit more along the lines of thrash and stayed a little bit closer to their roots than Metallica. Like I said, some people love that, some people want change, some people hate change. I'm the type that I actually do like change, so I like Metallica more in this aspect. I get a little bit less bored if I sat here and listened to Metallica's entire discography in like one sitting. I would get less bored than I would with the Megadeth catalog, just because Metallica does a lot of different things. I'm the type that I need change, I need a breath of fresh air, but I am going to give Megadeth this point because they are more consistent, whether I like that or not. I'm just going to use the Jesus Dave picture for that one. So yes, Megadeth is more consistent. It's all really subjective if you would rather a band be experimental or not, but Megadeth definitely takes the cake when it comes to that one. Okay, I think we've reached the point where I'm gonna have such a hard time deciding who I want for this. Like, I've kind of written out this video and kind of got an idea of who I wanted to win each category, but oh my gosh, this one I'm stumped on. I don't know what to do. Rhythm guitar. Man, James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine are literally the top two rhythm guitarists like in the world. Okay, let's just talk about James first. James with his down picking is insane. Learning how to play Metallica songs on guitar made me really appreciate how hard it is to be so consistent and precise. Like, there's so much precision in James Hetfield's wrist, okay? Like, strong wrist, the type of picking that will literally make your whole entire arm numb. Learning how to play songs like Master of Puppets, it's extremely hard stuff, and I really appreciate how the way that he writes his riffs are, the rhythm is like kind of more groovy, whereas Dave Mustaine is a little bit more of like a technical player. And I don't know, it just really depends on your personal taste when you say who's actually better. Dave Mustaine has the same skill level as James Hetfield to me in my head. I like James Hetfield's riff style better. I like the way that he writes his stuff better. But to say Dave Mustaine can't stand right there with him and keep up is crazy. I feel like they might tie on this category. Am I crazy for thinking this? I really want to put both of them on this and just make this basically invalid. I don't think I can choose between them. This has always been the worst thing for me, choosing between the two of them. I'm just speaking specifically about the guitar playing, maybe not so much the writing. If they had a guitar duel with each other and it was like a real battle of skill, I don't know who would win. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments down below, but watching what both of them can do is crazy. I will say Dave did have an injury. He had like a nerve become damaged in his arm. He had a surgery. He had to kind of like relearn everything, but it's impressive how much he did relearn. And man, James is like a rhythm machine. But so is Dave. I don't want to let my personal bias get me, so I think it's a draw. Man, this is going to be the one. It's going to be Dave and James way back in the day. You guys might get mad at me for this, but I can't choose between them. Next up is lead guitar. So I feel like this one is kind of easy. I think Megadeth always had more intricate solos, all around better lead guitar. I feel like maturing is realizing that maybe Kirk Hammett isn't all that great. Now, don't get me wrong, he's very talented. He has some great solos. He's done some great things. I feel like Megadeth's guitar work over the years has been a little more creative. One thing that we're actually going to talk about today is how many lineup changes Megadeth has had, and they've had a lot of different lead guitarists, but I'm talking more about like the Marty Friedman era, and even Dave Mustaine has some lead guitar work and solos. Like think about a song like Lucretia. He even is very good at the lead guitar, like light years better than Kirk Hammett. So it's like, it feels obvious to give Megadeth this one. I'm gonna give that one to Marty Friedman specifically, but just their entire catalog, I feel like they've always just had better lead guitar, and Kirk Hammett just tends to be a little bit repetitive. There's like certain licks that he just does over and over again, especially in like the later half of Metallica's catalog. I feel like he kind of ran out of things to do, and a lot of their albums have like the same solos on them over and over. Like 72 Seasons was really bad for that. It sounded like Kurt came into the studio, played the same solo 12 times and dipped and got that paycheck. Like, I'm sorry, it is what it is. All right, let's talk about bass guitar. Now, of course, Metallica, you never want to be a bassist in Metallica. Let's just say that. It's like a curse. And then I'm just gonna talk about like Dave Ellefson, because I feel like he was the bassist for the most part in Megadeth. So let's just kind of go off of that. When it comes to Metallica, I guess we have to talk about all of the bassists, like Cliff, Jason, and Robert. We're not going to talk about the first bassist. That's irrelevant to me right now. I think his name was Ron McGovney. I feel like he wasn't in Metallica long enough to really count. So we're going to start with Cliff. I feel like in Metallica, the bass guitar was always more of its own instrument, whereas in Megadeth, it was just like a complementary instrument. Metallica focused on bass. That's so ironic to say when Injustice for All exists. Anyways, at least in Cliff times, think about songs like Orion and stuff, and just Cliff Burton was very pronounced in the production, and I know there's a lot of drama with that, with them turning down the bass on Jason, probably because they just knew that no one could compare to Cliff. That's a different conversation for a different day. But I do think Metallica actually recovered from that whenever they got Rob Trujillo in the band. He is an incredible bassist, and he has his own groove and his own thing. Like I said, I feel like the bass in Metallica is like more of its own standalone instrument. In Megadeth, I feel like you don't really notice Dave Ellefson's... I just want to say Dave Elephant. That's killing me. Dave Ellefson, I feel like his bass lines are great, but they're just not as noticeable. Like, he feels a little bit more forgettable to me. So as ironic as this is, I'm going to have to give it to Metallica on this one. And honestly, Rob Trujillo does not get enough respect, okay? He's no longer the new guy. He's actually been in the band the longest out of all the bassists. He's been in there longer than, like, Cliff and Jason combined. Like, he deserves respect. I don't know this weird thing people do where they still treat him like he's not really a permanent member of the band. But put some respect on that guy's name, okay? The drums. Man, guys. I love Lars Ulrich. I think he is an important member of Metallica. Of course, he really is Metallica. It wouldn't exist without him. Everyone knows that he's not a good drummer. Like, he's a way better drummer than I would ever be. I don't really like saying that he's like a bad drummer, because at the end of the day, he's in one of the biggest bands in the world, and he's got some great work. Like, think about a song like Dyer's Eve. You really think you can do that? Like, there's been times in his career that he is just legendary. So let's not just shit on him. Like, let's not do the Lars meme right now. But we also can't pretend that Megadeth doesn't have freaking astronomical drumming compared to Metallica. Metallica's is just a little bit more simple, less complex. When it comes to thrash, I feel like drumming is very important, and Megadeth kind of gets it better than Metallica. They get what being thrash is, and the drumming actually kind of like matches that genre better. I'm specifically going to be talking about like Nick Menza. Nick Menza is my favorite drummer ever in Megadeth. I also liked Gar, I believe was his name. I think he did it on Peace Sells, right? Great drumming there too, and I think Dirk is his name, is like the current drummer. He's great too. They've always really been on par with having really talented drummers with really like complex skills, you know, like it just feels way more dynamic than Metallica's drumming, and Lars sometimes can't even stay on time. We all know this. So I'm gonna give drums to Megadeth. It would be a sin not to do that, and specifically Nick Menza, because may he rest in peace. What a legend. The next category is vocals. Now guys, we all know who I'm going to pick for this, but I do have things to say about this, okay? Man, it's not a secret that Dave Mustaine doesn't have the best singing voice. Like, it's definitely not for everyone. On certain albums, it's kind of annoying. You know, he's just really not the best singer. But one thing is, James Hetfield kind of sucks too at moments in his career. I don't know, I feel like James went through this phase where he ended every single word or phrase in He was like, and nah, and nah. It gets so annoying once you notice that you can't stop on like Load and Reload, and he does it on Death Magnetic. He just went through this era where he did it so much. Like on the Black album, his singing was great. I feel like it was the first time he really like took it so seriously, and like he trained and wanted to sound professional and like get it all right. Like songs like Nothing Else Matters, his voice is like butter on that album and on that song. He had his moments where it wasn't the best, but at the end of the day, Dave is like definitely more nasally. He's got like the higher pitch and it's a little bit obnoxious sometimes. I like Dave's voice a lot, and I don't think it necessarily deserves the hate that it has, just because he has so much character in his voice. You can just recognize him as soon as you hear him. He's so memorable, and that's kind of important when you're a vocalist or a frontman. So he has that going for him. I don't necessarily have the best track record with listening to annoying singers, because I love Greta Van Fleet, so we have that. So maybe I'm not the girl to be talking about this, but just for me in general, I do think that James has just like the technically better voice. James's is just tamer, easier to listen to, just classically better, so we're gonna have to give that one to James. I've just always been like such a big fan of James's voice. Like he will always be one of my favorites. So now let's talk about lineup changes. So what I mean by this is like, how consistent has the band been with keeping members? Honestly, we talked about the bass thing with Metallica and their bassists and how they never seem to be able to keep one over the years, but if you think about it, in hindsight, they've pretty much had the same lineup their entire career. I guess ever since they truly got established. We have the drama in the beginning with them firing Dave and hiring Kirk and all that stuff, but realistically, they've had the same lineup they have right now for like 25 years. And before that, it's always really been James, Lars, and Kirk, just with changing bassists here and there. Of course, they treated Jason horribly, and he deserves justice. Like, that's ironic to say. Go listen to And Justice for Jason. But anyways, Metallica is way more consistent with this. Like Megadeth has changed its lineup so many times. They recently announced that Kiko is leaving. I love Kiko so much. He was like one of the best additions to their lineups in years. I understand why he left. He's got like family stuff to deal with. But gosh, they have changed members so many times over the years that it's pretty much only just been Dave Mustaine at this point. He's like the only like member that's been there the entire time. So Metallica has to take it there. They've been the one that has stayed the most consistent with their band members over the years. So next we're going to talk about lyrics. This is one of the ones that I had the hardest time choosing, because once again I have to choose between Dave Mustaine and James Hetfield. Those are the two guys that write the lyrics for Metallica and Megadeth, and my gosh, they have a lot in common with the way that they write. I feel like sometimes Dave is a little bit more on the nose, and like he is good at writing like metaphors, and he's poetic, and you know, a lot of their stuff is about like politics or the world and this and that. I think overall James has been a little bit better at being a little bit more poetic and not so in your face. He makes things a little bit more vague to where you have to like dig deep and put your own interpretation on lyrics sometimes, versus Dave tends to be a little bit more literal. Not all the time, but for me personally, I really like the more poetic aspect that James does. Sometimes Dave's lyrics come across as like cynical or boomerish or dreadful. I feel like James's lyrics for me have always been more relatable. I can always relate to a Metallica song. Sometimes a Megadeth song, I'm just gonna be real, I don't listen to Megadeth to be relatable ever. It's just never been a factor for me. I don't think I relate to Dave whatsoever. Our personalities are just very different. I guess some songs like Trust are kind of relatable, The Hardest Part of Letting Go, songs like that, but overall I feel like Megadeth got a little bit more experimental with like storytelling and stuff, which is really fun in their lyrics. But this category for me is probably just gonna have to be more of a personal choice. I feel like I'm not gonna be able to separate myself from the bias of this. I just love James Hetfield's lyrics more. That's just the truth. So I'm gonna put James in the lyrics category, and just think about a song like Creeping Death. It's like a storytelling song and so well done. And then he has the super relatable stuff like Fade to Black. You know, it's just, the lyrics in Metallica is one of my favorite aspects. Even now to this day, like on 72 Seasons, the lyrics were the best part of the whole album. I didn't even really like the music that much. I felt like a lot of it was repetitive. A lot of the songs were too long. We had the issue with Kirk Hammett solos, all of that. But the lyrics were so good. James is really good at being vulnerable and opening up. And the song Inamorata is golden. Like, he poured out his whole entire soul on that song, and really on that whole album. Songs like Too Far Gone, so relatable to me. I could go on about this forever. Ooh, this is a fun category. This one is controversy. Okay, so what this means is which band is least controversial, and that's going to be hard because both bands have a lot of controversies and dramas under their belt. First, let's talk about Metallica. Of course, the bassist situation, them treating Jason Newsted poorly and essentially hazing him. They had like a college hazing, like fraternity vibe with him back in those days. Really treated him poorly. That was just really a mess. And then we have like the Napster lawsuit, which you can argue now that Lars was kind of right about it. There's like pros and cons to that entire situation to me. Like I'm kind of like on the fence about how I feel about that situation, but that's definitely one of the biggest times that people were like really mad at Metallica. People really don't like Lars. They think he's greedy, all of that. And then we have the other side of it where, you know, a lot of people don't really like Dave Mustaine because they see him as like whiny and like he never got over being kicked out of Metallica, and people say that that's like all he talks about, which kind of isn't true. I mean, I feel like a lot of times in like interviews and stuff, it's brought up to him and he kind of like has to talk about it. I feel like he's gotten better in like the past literally just 3 or 4 years. When he's asked about it, he's a little bit less bitter. I think he has more forgiveness in his heart than he used to. But you can't blame the guy looking back at being just like heartbroken. He felt like everything was taken from him. He was hearing his own songs being played by this other band. Like, I do feel bad for him looking back. But also at the same time, he always did have like a bitter attitude. He had a little bit of an ego. I feel like there was just weird victim complex vibes going on, so he's like kind of annoying to listen to sometimes. So that's always the thing. It's like people either hate Megadeth because they don't like Dave and they think he's whiny about being kicked out, he should get over it, he's got this new band and like just blah blah blah, right? But then some people really hate Metallica for kicking Dave out and the way that they treated him, and apparently he didn't get royalties for some of his songs that they played. Like, he said in a Joe Rogan interview that Kirk Hammett was getting his royalties for certain songs for like years before they fixed that. So some people hate Metallica for that reason. I guess when it comes to like overall wide range opinion of both bands, I think more people have a bad taste in their mouth about Megadeth. Usually when you hear the name Megadeth, you're like, oh, isn't that one guy's band that got kicked out of Metallica? They're kind of known for that, which is really tragic because I love the band so much. I love their music. I try to separate them from that, you know, but that's kind of what they're always going to be remembered for. Unfortunately, Dave is always going to be remembered as that guy. I think his own personality and attitude towards it is a big part of why it's like that still 40 years later. I think Metallica is just more widely liked. They're definitely more popular numbers wise, but just in general, I do think the members of Metallica are more liked than the members of Megadeth. Granted, no one really cares about any of the members other than Dave when it comes to controversy. I guess the one member of Metallica no one likes is Lars, but I'm a Lars lover. I don't know why. This one is extremely hard, and you could really argue that both bands could like tie in this category, but I'm going to say Metallica wins in this category for being less controversial, which feels really wrong to say, especially using a Lars picture. But like I said, I think Megadeth is always going to just be remembered as the band from the guy that got kicked out of Metallica. Okay, the second to last category is going to be production quality. Now, this might come down to personal taste a little bit, but I feel like it's no secret that Metallica has a lot of problems with their production quality over the years. We have the obvious one with And Justice for All, turning down the bass. Like, some people like that there's no bass, some people could care less, some people can't stand the fact that it doesn't have bass. For me, I think about albums like Saint Anger. A lot of people don't like the like percussion and the way that it's mixed in. It's like super harsh, hard hitting. It feels like it's just like raw dogs your eardrums, but I'm kind of the type to kind of like that. I think Death Magnetic is their absolute worst produced album. It sounds terrible. It's like so compressed. It sounds like you're underwater. As a kid, when I had it on my MP3 player, I thought that I just got like a bad MP3 file or something. I didn't know that the album actually sounded that bad. It literally is terrible. I really like their Fleming albums. Yes, that includes And Justice for All and Ride the Lightning. I feel like those are pretty good. Bob Rock era. Like, Bob Rock knew how to produce albums. Think of like the Black Album, Load and Reload. Those are so crisp, and I feel like if you want to talk about perfect quality production, those albums are definitely up there. Especially Black Album, dude. They put their whole entire bussies into producing that album. It is so crisp. The way that the snares hit, oh my gosh, like that album is golden. One criticism with Metallica is like their newer albums are so overly polished that it sounds like an AI band. It doesn't sound like a real band playing, and I understand why people would be turned off by that, especially when it comes to metal and rock. Some people like that more raw quality more. I kind of feel that way, like on 72 Seasons and Hardwired, it just has like no personality whatsoever, so that's a criticism for them. And now I'm going to talk about Megadeth's history with production quality. So overall, I feel like they have a little bit better and more of a consistent track record. I think albums like Rest in Peace, Peace Sells, and Countdown to Extinction are all really well done, really on par with like that Black Album sound that I mentioned. We're not going to talk about the remasters because they are terrible. I do think like Super Collider and The World Needs a Hero, that sort of era, those albums don't necessarily have the best quality. Their newer stuff like Dystopia and the latest album, so what is it called? So Far So Good So What, whatever. It's such a long, we should probably talk about album names. Their album names sometimes are a little out of this world. But anyways, this is one of those ones that's really going to come down to personal taste. Like it's kind of 50-50. Like if you really want clean production, go with Metallica. If you want just good, consistent thrash quality, go to Megadeth. I do think for that one that I'm going to have to give it to Megadeth, and I'm going to use the Peace Sells because that one has some of the most crisp production out of all of them. Like that bass intro on the title track, absolute perfection. Okay, so the very last category is going to be longevity. Which band do I think is going to be around the longest, is going to be talked about the longest, is going to be that legendary icon status maybe 100 years from now? Like who are people going to be still listening to long after all the members are gone? This is an obvious answer, guys. It's definitely going to be Metallica. They are a force to be reckoned with. I feel like they have reached that just like entity status, I like to call it. They're not even just like legendary. They exist in a way that like no other bands do. Like they started so many things. They started thrash, or some people say Exciter did. I don't know, but you guys understand what I mean. They've become so like commercially successful and big in the world and in the mainstream that it's going to be hard for really any other band to become as popular and well known as them. Like you see their shirts everywhere. People that don't even listen to Metallica or know any of their stuff really wears their shirts. Or like that's another thing. There's not really anyone out there that doesn't know at least a couple Metallica songs or has heard some Metallica songs, like For Whom the Bell Tolls, Master of Puppets, Enter Sandman, Fuel. Like the latest Fortnite season, the whole entire trailer is Metallica's Fuel. Like it's a very mainstream thing, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to be a metalhead to listen to Metallica. I feel like you definitely have to be a metalhead to know Megadeth and listen to Megadeth. It's just one of those things, like Metallica's gonna be around forever. I don't think people are ever gonna forget about Metallica. They're not gonna fall into obscurity. I mean, I don't think Megadeth will either. Like they're always gonna be popular and known, especially amongst metalheads. But when it comes to like the realm of the world and just that iconic status, I feel like Metallica has that longevity in the bag. Okay guys, so I finished my list. I've tallied up the score and we do have a winner here. I'm sure everyone knows who got more points, but let's talk about how many points they each got. So Megadeth has come down to having 6 points. I did count the point with the rhythm guitar where James and Dave tied. I really can't choose between them on that. Please let me know in the comments what you would have chosen on this one. Like I am so stumped on that. So I pretty much just gave both of them a point for that one. So 6 points for Megadeth, and Metallica came out with 9 points. So Metallica did technically win by 3. Let's go ahead and give Metallica that winner spot. They deserve it. They're an iconic and legendary band. I do actually think objectively, as a whole, Metallica is the better band. It's really unfortunate that it does feel like Megadeth always comes second to Metallica, and I can understand how that's frustrating, and as a Megadeth fan, it is kind of shitty. Like, I'm sure it's a thing that Dave has really struggled with over the years, always being compared to this band, and I do wish the comparisons weren't a thing, and I'm part of the problem by making this video, but it's just like a 40-year-long thing that's like, it's just kind of how things are. This is the situation. I wish it wasn't like this. I think Megadeth, if Metallica wasn't who they were being compared to, Megadeth would be much more highly regarded. Like I said, Metallica is just a force to be reckoned with. I feel like they took a lot of things seriously when it comes to business. Like Lars is a very business-minded person, so he knew how to get the band to a certain commercial level of success that Megadeth didn't necessarily have, and you could argue that that stuff isn't even important, but it just, you know, it makes it where Megadeth is seen as just like a bigger deal than Megadeth in the general like public. My point is, it's not really fair that Megadeth is always compared to Metallica, because they're absolutely incredible on their own, one of my favorite bands of all time, so much respect to them. And honestly, I feel like they got a lot of points. I didn't just use my Metallica bias and just give Metallica every single point. I tried to be really fair with this one, and I think I did a good job. One thing is, if I wouldn't have let them tie on rhythm guitar, Metallica still would have won by 2 points, but I feel like Megadeth really held their own in this challenge. Okay, so that's all for my Megadeth versus Metallica competition. Let me know which points you agree with and disagree with in the comments down below. Like, let me know your final score between the bands. I want to see if other people end up with more points for Megadeth than I did or not. I'm very curious to see how that's going to go. But anyways, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!